Smoke signals from around the campfire.
Yeah, reimagining the future has been an ongoing theme, I'd say, for Campfire through the years, and I guess that sort of ties in with our session today, really, on creativity. Just to read the blurb I put down: to get lost for an hour or two in creative flow is one of the joys of life, an escapism of its own. As I feel the flow of music, writing, film, even the somewhat controversial at the moment, especially art of AI image manipulation or other actions that require more technical skills. Many would agree there's no better time than to reclaim technology for good as a counterbalance to getting out into nature for creative pursuits. The crux of this, as Matt has already suggested on his post this week, is to develop, and I quote, a daily practice of writing, drawing, singing, or playing an instrument is a real tonic, simply for the sake of cultivating an inner sensory response to the world that's entirely our own. Couple that with the daily practice of meditation, yoga, chigong, or whatever floats your morning calmness, and life begins to balance itself. But of course, those of us able to find time for the more creative and spiritual pursuits should always be grateful for the gift of finding the space in our lives to be able to do those things. So is there a creative urge burning inside you at the moment? Writing a book, blogging, gardening, making music or film, podcasting, painting? It's maybe time to unleash some new creative pursuits, and no better time than here and now to start. So on that note, I hand over to Matt and be interested to hear the direction he takes this in.
Thanks, Pete. First of all, I've got my camera remotely set up to the right on top of the speaker, so my eye line to yours might be a little unusual. So just imagine I'm looking you in the eye when I'm talking with you, and I've got my notes, which are fairly abstract, selection of musings on creativity just down to the right. So please forgive the confused eye lines that you may get, but it's also an opportunity to dip into the world of sound. And I'm going to jam this completely in the spirit of improvisation, which is of itself a creative practice, to make things up as you go along. And obviously central to music in many respects, probably most notoriously, famously, or most recognized in the world of jazz. But improvisation is simply the creative unfolding moment by moment without plan. And that's really important, because I think what creativity does in its most important and powerful sense is it brings us into the here and now. And there's a wonderful paradox in that, wrapped up within that, which I'll come on to in a minute. But first thing I want to do is reference a very successful writer and neuroscientist, Ian McGilchrist. He has a book called The Master in His Emissary, which some may have read. It's quite a hefty read. I've only dipped in and out of it. I don't actually have it with me, so I'm doing this from memory. I'm going to paraphrase him. I can't quote him directly. But he writes a very interesting section in his book about the relationship between language and music. And he suggests, as an anthropological view, that we sang as a species before we spoke, and that we sang before we had language. Now, that's really interesting, because it sort of makes sense, doesn't it, that we would have emotively connected to each other to warn each other about the dangers of wild, primitive existence. The woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger, to use the cliches. How do we let each other know we're in a state of danger, or we're in a state of rapture, or we're simply resonating and vibrating with the full moon, the lighting of the fire at the end of the hunt, the sharing of food? How do we express these things pre-language? Well, we understand that music is a medium that conveys emotion very quickly, very immediately. In fact, music probably, I'm sure there's plenty of people would argue against this, but my experience is that musically is the river of emotion. It conveys the movement of emotions more quickly than any other medium. And it organizes itself in a way that enables us to remember it. And so memory and music are interrelated. There's a lot of good study going on about how music accesses memory with people suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. There's a reason for that, and that is that the organization of our memories, according to Ian McGilchrist, going back into this world of where we're in the jungle and we need to share our experience, but we haven't yet developed language, means that the emotional expression of our voice, of sound, carries within it a message of the moment. It's a present moment message of what's going on around us. So if we sang before we spoke, that means that the expression of emotion through creative unfolding, through sound in that case, is actually innate to us. It's central, and it's central to our experience of survival, our necessity of survival. Language follows afterwards. Language is the sort of the explanation in detail, the more cerebral rather than emotive expression of experience. Now, why does this matter? Well, it means that we have built within us a sense of a need for our survival for creative expression in the moment, to try and describe what's going on for us personally in the moment. Our survival used to depend upon it, and those that could communicate the most powerfully and the most descriptively, albeit in an abstract sense, would have occupied an important place within society. They were the heralds for whatever was going on around them. So that's Ian McGilchrist and the functions of the brain and the history in humanity. We also know that memory, patterns, and strategy for survival are also interrelated. Now, they don't sound like they're very creative functions, but they are, because survival depended on the recognizing of patterns around us, the journey of the prey every day at the same time, or the pattern of the prey every week, every month, every year at the same times. Doing habits, doing habitual things gave us an advantage, if we remembered those patterns, to be able to strategize how we would capture that prey, therefore be able to eat it, and therefore be able to survive. So our survival depended on memorizing patterns, archiving them, but then the important bit, the creative bit, is the predicting of that happening again, the reasoning of and the predicting of, in other words, the imagining of an as yet unfolded future. So very early in humanity's history, we were developing an ability to predict, to imagine and predict, which was absolutely central to our survival. That's the most important early function of the imagination, and creativity is related to that, because if you can predict an outcome and you've used your imagination to do that, you can start to imagine and predict different ways of capitalizing on that for your survival. Not just one way, digging the hole in the ground to capture the woolly mammoth as it walks on its 5 o'clock trek to the watering hole. You begin to imagine other ways, and the creative function starts to become creative of itself. So imagination, memory, and pattern are interrelated and have been for a very long time. And so repetition is also part of that. The repeated activities of someone or something start to inform us and give us insight from which we can then start to predict other outcomes. So we start to see a relationship between expression, present expression, repetition, memory, pattern, all which enable our survival. And so imagination is evolving out of these necessary components. Now, if we take a sideways step and look at an ancient culture that developed an incredibly sophisticated sense of both storytelling and creativity, the ancient Greeks, which happens to be where I am. I'm not in ancient Greece, I'm in Greece. We look into ancient Greece and we realize that the goddess of memory, Mnemosyne, or Mnemosyne, sorry, it's a silent M, Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, was the goddess of all the creative muses. So they created a hierarchy of importance through story, which basically said memory is absolutely critical to the function of creativity. None of the muses existed without their mother having given birth to them. So metaphorically, memory gives birth to creativity. And that correlates back to this idea of remembering the pattern in the jungle, the pattern of movement, the pattern of the rising of the sun, setting of the sun, the moon, etc. Recognizing, archiving, memorizing patterns gives birth to creativity. So what is creativity then? It is the collision of archived memories into an evolved present moment, an evolved new reality. We're taking an archive memory of a certain set of situations and we're extrapolating it into a possible future. And if we give that form in a drawing on a cave or an expression vocally, we're being creative, we're being artists in the moment. So that's how fundamental creativity is to human beings. That's a very broad view. I'm not an expert in anthropology, history, or neuroscience, but you only need to follow the high line threads of those things to realize that that's actually the case. So coming into the present moment, if we live in a world where social media, amongst other technologies, is entraining, conditioning large numbers of people to respond to shorter and shorter cues, in other words, the technologies are giving us less and less time to express ourselves. They're giving us more and more information on a higher and higher frequency of repetition. Our innate capabilities with patterning, repetition, and memory are being hijacked. It's a simple fact. We're being hacked by the technological external world around us, if we allow it to affect us so. If we choose to engage with social media patterning on a daily basis, to the point at which we're starting to lose our attention span or lessen our attention span. And I'm working on some research projects in the charity sector, which is confirming all this, that younger people are very aware of the fact that they are losing their attention spans, or their attention spans are becoming less and less. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we're living in an age where technologies are displacing what is fundamentally an innate capability of every single human being on the planet, which is our inner sense of creativity. That is the ability to assess, to store, and then to draw on and collide archived memories and learned patterns in order to create a new possible future, a new possible future. So if we're living in a world where our technologies, and in particular social media, but now AI is in every single sense, are short-circuiting that capacity, we're in a difficult space, or we're potentially in a dangerous space in terms of the evolution of humanity. We are giving away our power to the agents of technology. Now that sounds a little bit Luddite and it sounds a little bit drastic, but that is my honest, learned viewpoint and experience of where we're at. And it's the main case for why we need a creative practice. I'm just going to talk a little bit further about some personal experiences to bring that into a much more personalized context. I've spoken broadly. I've given the big picture on the importance of creativity as a fundamental part of our modus operandi, our inner operating system. When I was about, I think I would have been about 7 or 8 years old, my father used to play 2 symphonies, Beethoven's 7th and Brahms' 4th symphonies all the time. He loved them both and he played them a lot. And I learned to love them through hearing them so often, to the point at which I used to go and find his record collection, dig out the records, play the LPs and listen to them for hours on end myself. I couldn't read music, but what happened was, because I love these pieces of music so much, I learned to memorize them and I could sing them from start to finish, to the point at which I could turn the record player off and actually sing both of these symphonies from start to finish from memory at a very young age. Now, that's not remarkable, but it's indicative of a sense of memory in relation to organized pattern. So music is just organized energy, isn't it? It's patterns of energy. And our memory can latch onto that very easily and very quickly. And that was my personal experience, that at a very young age, I cultivated a musical ear. I learnt to memorize bits of music. And then the next part of the process, having absorbed not just Brahms and Beethoven, but many forms of music, was to then give that energy back, reciprocate the energy outwards, which meant that I howled and screamed at my parents to buy me an instrument. So they bought me a guitar. And then I started to try and express what I could remember on the guitar. And I would do that also listening to new pieces of music, and obsessively would listen to records and try and learn them, and this function of memory, and then craft the brain telling the hands what to do based on a memory. I mean, that's an interesting idea of itself, isn't it? That art and craft is drawing on an archive and then telling the hands to remanifest something new from that archive. So that's what I was doing. I was re-representing my memory of music through my hands into the guitar. for personal pleasure. It wasn't just pleasure. It took me into a headspace that I can only describe as both healing and spiritual. I used to get lost in playing sound on the guitar for no particular end other than the fact that it made me feel good, and I would lose my sense of time. Time dissolved. There are various quotes about time music in particular. Can't remember, there's a French philosopher, is it Levi Strauss, Primo? I can't remember. Anyway, music both describes and destroys time, is the paraphrase quote. The idea that music will give us a grid through which we can order a sense of time through beats, through counting beats, through numbered bars. And at the same time, when we immerse in music and get lost in it, we lose our sense of time. Our sense of time is actually based on memory and experience, isn't it? It's based on our archive of learned memories, and then how we relate those to the outside world at any given moment. So memory, pattern, rhythm, all of these components are telling us where we are at any given moment and enabling us to connect and talk to other people about where we are at any given moment, or talk to ourselves. And it's this expression of our experience that is probably the most important part of why creativity matters, and why it's something we desperately need to hang on to as individuals throughout our lives. When I first had a manager, I was a guitarist, session guitarist for many years, and I had a manager for a while, and we were discussing, as we often did, what matters about art, why art is important, why creativity and art matter. And we were discussing the role of an artist. What is the purpose or the role of an artist? And he came up with a description which I think actually no one's bettered as far as I'm concerned. And he said this: an artist's role is simply this, to say, this is what I see, what do you see? This is what I see, what do you see? What it tells us is that the role of an artist is to reflect back the state of the world at any given moment, much the same as early human beings would have reflected emotively through noise, their experience of the moment, no different, so that we can have meaningful expression, relationship around our shared experience of what it is to be alive. If we don't have the artists, how do we know where we're at in a truthful sense, especially with the idea of truth, news, and information being so corrupted and hijacked? So we need very personalized, relatable expressions of authentic experience. That's the role of an artist. This is what I see, what do you see? It's how we form much more meaningful conversations about the state of the world. I had this idea this morning before the meeting of, what if we displaced news with a program that was news format, but instead of it being news items, what we had was an artist's expression based on an experience that's going on in the world right now. Let's say the World Cup, and we get Banksy to show us 3 images that relate to the World Cup. And rather than us sitting there with this one-way communication of a newsreader telling us how the state of the world is, we sat and we had a conversation about that piece of art. So we once removed ourselves from the reality and talked in an abstract sense about somebody else's interpretation. This is what he sees, what do I see? This is what he sees, what do I see? What if news was displaced by that functionality? We'd have a very different experience of debate around notions of reality. We'd have a much more accepting understanding that one's personal experience of life might be subtly different from somebody else's. And therefore, there are no absolute truths, only values and shared values or debated values. We'd have a much more interesting state of affairs. Now, that means we're dependent upon an artist to be a sort of bard or a soothsayer about where the world's at, not so that they can give us an absolute version, but so that we can discuss it. So I would love it if everyone became literate in the same way that we walk, in the same way that we learn to express ourselves through language. I'd love us to be literate with the idea of creative flow and creativity. When I was 7, this is the final thing I'm going to talk about before opening up any responses from anybody. When I was, I think, 7 years old, I wrote a poem, which I took to my infant school teacher. I think I would have been 7. And it was written in rhyming couplets, and it was about meeting a snake, the boa constrictor. And I managed to get it to rhyme. I think just 2 verses, two paragraphs, 2 verses. And the teacher convinced me that I didn't write it. She got really angry at me, and she told me I'd copied it from a book and it wasn't my own. And it absolutely devastated me. And I didn't realize how much it affected me until about the age of 35, where a very good friend of mine, Rosie Wetters, who's a very successful cellist in the pop scene in the UK, gave me a copy of The Artist's Way. She said, I think you're blocked. I think you should do this. And so I took this book, The Artist's Way, and I did the 12-week course. And it utterly transformed just about every aspect of my life, because what Julia Cameron recognized was that there are experiences early on in life which can change our understanding of our own relationship to creativity. One of the exercises that she does is to ask you to remember a teacher at school who may have discouraged you from doing something creative, and to write them a letter in which you point out to them the absolute truth from your perspective of what was going on. So I wrote this letter as part of this course. Dear Mrs. So-and-so, I bloody well did write that poem. How dare you suggest that I didn't? I wrote it because I'm a good writer and I love writing, and writing is something I'm going to start doing once again, despite your attempts to discourage me from doing that. I wrote this letter, I burnt it. But the realization that came with that little ritual was that actually I was always meant to be a writer, probably more than a musician. This is something that's just coming into play now. Julia recognized the importance of vanquishing creative ghosts and hijackers, especially from early age. Why early on in life? Because when you're a child, the play pit, the sand pit, the playroom, the place of play is where we really first connect with our imagination. And we don't get taught to do that. A child can do it with just a bit of earth and some rocks. They don't need too many cues to become imaginative and creative. And what they can do in that moment is create the most astonishing world of fantasy, of roles, and of absolute truths. Have you ever interrupted a child playing and you ask them, why have you got the princess wearing that strange hat? Don't you know that princesses always wear strange hats on a Thursday? You're going to get some piece of wisdom from a child back in those moments, which is undeniable. It's so powerful. They're so convinced of this world. It is absolutely their truth. And Julia Cameron's trick was to recognize that this state of play as a child is fundamental, it's inherent, it's natural to every human being, and that once we've cleared any of the blocks that we've had imposed upon us or have created ourselves to accessing that state, we begin to experience a type of creative flow. But that flow is absolutely dependent upon a daily ritualized practice. And I don't mean ritualized in some sort of dark occult sense. I simply mean as in honoring the sacredness of your own practice. And she created these practices through her book, The Artist's Way, which have become a huge part of my life. And I now run courses using that. She joined the dots on the idea of the innate state of being for a child is play, and that when we lose that as adults, we lose something very, very vital and very important. My extrapolation of that idea is that place of inner play, that inner realm of absolute personal truths, which can then be cultivated through a daily creative practice, is actually what protects us from all the bullshit in the world and keeps us nourished with our own sense of pure sovereignty. It's identity, it's connection to your own identity, access to your inner voice, whatever form that manifests itself in, whatever medium you practice in, whether it's doodling, whether it's sketching, whether it's painting, watercolors, oils, whether it's sculpting, whether it's poetry, whether it's long form writing, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's dance. There are others. It doesn't matter how you access that, but a daily practice which enables you to connect to that is a bit like waking up every morning and saying, oh yeah, that's who I am. This is what I see. What do you see?
That's brilliant, Matt. Thank you. Hearing you in full flow is a joy to behold, actually, and it sort of brought back our discussions when you first came over to Paros about maybe doing a podcast, occasional podcast together. And I think hearing two people bounce off each other is another thing altogether as well. And that's something that some of the best podcasts at the moment seem to be capturing that spirit. The Great Humbling was one we broadcast on Campfire Radio. Dugald Hind and Ed Gillespie, but and your writings, of course, your recent blog articles and little bits of film have been essential viewing for a few people on the site. So I'd encourage people who haven't seen that to check it out. I'm sure people will have some questions and feedback on what you've said. So would anybody please raise a digital hand if you'd like to if you'd like to respond to that? I mean, I have a few things I'd like to bring up as well. Anyone like to go first? Ken.
There we go. One of the things with these meetings is I try to take notes, and it just goes so fast that it's very hard to do. I'm going to have to learn how to view. How should I phrase this? I'm going to have to learn how to view the recorded version. I guess that's the way to phrase it. I've been writing about music for over 40 years. I do not sing. I do not play instruments. I shake pom-poms. And I wonder, is that it's a creative thing to write about music and to think about which bands go together in some complementary way. How did seeing Froghammer a couple nights ago link with seeing Donna the Buffalo earlier in the evening? How does listening to a program on radio called Hot Jazz Saturday Night, which is a lot of ragtime, jump blues. I'm no expert on that stuff. I don't know. All I know is that I liked it. And how does that fit in, with all the other stuff? And maybe my creative input, I mean, all these words are so hard, is to figure out how, since I'm not singing or playing instruments, is to figure out how these different genres fit together, complement each other. I mean, I do think about writing a book. Unfortunately, I've had my sense of peace of mind has been absolutely obliterated by the larger events of the past 4 to 6 years. And I think in order to do a larger project, you really need to have peace of mind or a bit more optimism. That's really hard for me to come by right now. But I am trying to think of, what kind of project could I do that reflects my personal journey with English folk rock, world music, klezmer, all these different things. And even of late, my most recent order from Barnes & Noble included, hope this doesn't shock anybody, I'm used to being such an elitist, the Cowsills, Dolly Parton, and Neil Young. Neil Young's quite the philosopher. And I was really impressed with the thing he did called Greendale about a high school cheerleader who becomes a radical environmental activist. Gee, might I see something of myself in that? Could be.
Thanks,
Can
Ken.
I address the first point, because it's a very interesting one. Writing about music rather than creating it. I used to have long and quite impassioned arguments with an ex-girlfriend of mine. She's become a very successful art critic, much to my chagrin, because I used to say to her, being an art critic is almost the antithesis of being an artist. You're just describing everybody. Ordering a meal doesn't make you the chef. Describing the meal doesn't make you the chef either. And she would say, well, the creative process of me writing about art is a creative process. How can you say that? And she's right. It's how you do it. The act of creativity can manifest itself in absolutely any way. So if you wrote a critical book about any particular genre of music, and you wrote it in particular about your jumping from one genre to another, the joining of dots on connections that seem perhaps abstract but actually have some sort of meaning underneath it, then you're engaged in a creative flow. I mean, I don't see any reason why one shouldn't do that. That's not less creative than making music. It's just a different use of a creative mind.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
I had to share that quote.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have gotten along with him, but he certainly was a seminal figure and a seminal influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting what you said, Ken, about finding the right peace of mind. And that brought to mind how do we create the right conditions for being creative? How do we get the confidence? How do we put ourselves in the right place? Because I've got no doubt you've got a brilliant book or two in you, but how do you, if for the last 4 or 6 years you've not felt in the right place to do that, what can we do to make a shift there? I don't know if Matt has a response on that in particular.
Yeah, I mean, that's a large part of what I do, which is how to get people into that right frame of mind. First of all, you've got to recognize what the blocks are. What's stopping me from being in that frame of mind? You have to describe that and observe that and honor it. And this is why Julia Cameron's work has been so brilliant. I don't think anyone's done such a thorough job of understanding how we creatively block ourselves. Why? Because she understands what creativity is and where it comes from. So anything that's not allowing you to access your playfulness, your inner child, is stopping you from being creative. So one has to create a series of circumstances, practices, self patterns that get you back into that place. And there's loads
to an extent.
Absolutely. Which hat? I'm wearing my producer hat. I'm wearing my artist hat. How you dress influences how you express to the outside world, the language you use with yourself. I'm working with someone on a different project at the moment who uses astonishingly self-deprecating language in the way she presents herself to the world, and I'm really trying to help her realize the impact that has on her behavior, to CBT, cognitive behavioral function, the way we describe. So if you say to me, I'm not an artist, I'm a critic, you're not going to be an artist, you're going to be a critic. And interestingly enough, one of the great observations around unlocking your creativity is recognizing the inner voice that is the inner critic. When you start to say things to yourself, is it a critical or is it a supportive voice that's speaking? And the simplest trick, if I want to offer you one strategy for getting you into the right frame of mind, I would hijack Julia Cameron's morning pages. So write three pages freehand, stream of consciousness every morning, three A4 pages. Don't think about what you're writing, write whatever comes into your head. If you can't think of anything to say, write the words, I can't think of anything to say. Just allow whatever to come through, and observe to yourself how often things that are self-critical start to appear, how your inner voice might be self-critical, and make a separate note on another page of these self-critical statements. And then on the other side of the page, write the equal and opposite version. So if what comes up in your head every morning is I'm a critic, not a writer, I'm a critic, not an artist, I criticize music, I listen to, write that down. And then on the other side, write the equal and opposite. I'm a lover of music. I appreciate fully what I experience, and I creatively express that. Turn it into an affirmation.
Sorry, Ken, I had to mute you there. If you could just stick a hand up, otherwise we just get into an open tit for tat thing. If you'd like to respond to that now, then we'll go on to Chris, who's got his hand up.
Yeah. That does combine with a lot of stuff that therapists and other counselors have told me. And, getting the peace of mind is tough. It requires a bit of optimism and patience. Very hard to come by in the United States and elsewhere now, probably. I have, how would I get to a state where I felt I could do something more complex than just a CD review or pointing people to some band on my Facebook page or on Campfire? I've never been very confident, but on the other hand, you can see the outfit here. One of the things that gives me the greatest pleasure is turning people on to other things. And a couple of nights ago, when I saw, Froghammer, the DC area-based English-style folk rock dance band, one of my friends from the Ethiopian immigrant community was there. And I really like the idea of bringing people from different parts of my life to meet each other.
Yeah,
it's happened.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks for.
All this is kind of garbled. I'm sorry.
No, it all makes sense. Thanks for raising that. Chris, you've got your hand up.
First observation, if you know somebody that stutters, ask them to sing because they can communicate better.
Yeah.
The other things is that with autistic people, they communicate in a different way to what we do. Plus the third observation, there's more imagination in nature than there is in us.
Yes, couldn't agree more. I think the patterns of nature tell us that creativity is the natural state of all things around us. I mean, what is the natural world doing if it's not creating on a second by second basis? It's astonishing what's going on around us, moment by moment. The world is inventing, reinventing itself, collapsing and dying and reinventing itself. You know, every single plant, every single species, every creature, every physical aspect of the world around us is being shaped through time, changing its form. There's a constant state of creativity going on around us. It's actually unnatural for human beings not to be creative if you compare us to everything else that's going on around us. We don't exist in isolation to the natural world. We're an extension of it or part of it. So, you know, I think that's actually the most powerful observation of all, is that you know, that nature is the most creative force of all. And we learn creativity from nature. To be creative is to be part of the natural world.
Not to mention the inspiration we can gain from being out in nature, which can be an incredible lift, or just a change of scenery. And I think it sort of relates to what I was saying about technology and nature, finding that balance. Because for me, when it was an Apple Mac that got me into all sorts of new types of creativity, you know, making music. I made an album through just learning Cubase on the Mac to a very elementary level, but it was enough for me to actually produce music that I thought I could share in a wider context. And within 6 months of having my first Apple Mac, I think I'd learned Quark Express to the level of being able to put a magazine together, which was, again, opened up all sorts of new possibilities. And through printing this magazine, we created, I suppose, a scene that then evolved into the Big Chill. So this all happened within a couple of years of Apple opening up these new vistas, not to mention, you know, photo manipulation through Photoshop, web design. I think we were the first club to have a website, but it was very basic before the web went color. And just learning those basic skills was a revelation to me, and it did change a lot. Is anyone else, Diane, AB, any feedback? I know AB missed some of the beginning part. Are you on a stable connection now?
Yeah, I am. I'm at the station. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I've been thinking about writing a book for 4 or 5 years, and also doing a podcast. And I guess I've got a block somewhere. I don't know what the block is. I think it's probably the self-esteem, confidence thing, the fear of rejection thing. So I've been doing some work on my inner child, but I guess I just need to kind of push myself to just do it and not worry about being rejected.
Abby, would you like to jump on a no obligation coaching session with me at some point? And
I would love to. I can't today because I'm out and about.
Nor me. Okay, well, look, keep in touch, and let's just find an appropriate moment, and we'll just have an hour-long conversation about what those blocks might represent. And like I say, no obligation, no cost or anything. Just an exploration of it. So you'll be surprised at how many ways how many ways it can manifest itself. So yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, and
okay, great.
I would
Thanks.
put in a strong personal recommendation for Matt's ability to, I mean, he's done a couple of sessions with me, and I think his ability to listen, at first and foremost, so important in terms of understanding creativity, understanding the energy of where another person's coming from. But then he was able to get a very good, an immediate overview of what he saw as my current position and the blocks I might have been facing, or the exciting challenges I was a bit unsure about, and came back with something very positive, which I really felt I benefited from.
Yeah, because I've actually even written the contents of my, like, I've got the whole framework out. Oh, I left it in the States, so I don't have it on me. I did it online, but I actually got to the stage where I actually wrote everything down, and I just needed to like fill it all out, and I backed off. Same with the podcast, I backed off. So it's,
I understand this world very well. Let's have a conversation, because there's lots of ways we can work with that. Lots of ways.
Diane.
Yeah, my head's gone all over the place, Matt. Thank you. It's wonderful. Because I keep going, oh yeah, there's this. And actually the thing that's coming up now in this moment is, I mean, I've run workshops for years. I started off, the very first workshop I ran when I went self-employed in 1991 was on mind mapping and helping people to, you know, break through writing notes as lists on lined paper in portrait, rather than going with the mind map, which is landscape and free form on plain paper and wonderful. And yeah, that was brilliant. And yeah, so there's so many things in here, because there's, you know, accelerated learning stuff. There's, you know, the whole, you know, I loved your quote there, relatable expressions of a shared experience. I think that really resonated with me as very powerful. And yeah, I mean, I use creativity all the time. I mean, my blanket, this is one of my lockdown projects from 2020. You know, I paint, I sing, I dance, I do all sorts of things, play lots of instruments and things, and just love it. So yeah, there's always something around, and I have things like, I've got things that provide a stimulus. So I'll just go and get him, because he's just there, just a few feet away. Just
Quick pause for thought.
all sorts of things can provide stimuli, and this is one of the presents that my grandchildren gave me for Christmas, who's a sheep. And he decided he wanted to be more prominent, so he's right at the front of my altar at the moment. And I just keep looking at him, and we keep having these conversations, and it's fabulous. So he's kind of a muse at the moment, this little sheep.
Amazing.
Which is, you know, fantastic. But I also recently was on a Zoom with somebody she was taking us through a process which I'd done with her a number of years ago. And it's about finding your muse, or meet the muse, she calls it. And the first time I did it, no one arrived. But this time when I did it recently, it was fabulous, because I had this amazing female in white in a huge spacious cavern who appeared, and she's a queen, and she's absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, so I'm having fun sort of just again sitting with her, very appropriate obviously for winter time, and the kind of looking like ice, although it didn't feel cold in the cavern with her, which was amazing. So yeah, but yeah, there's so much stuff. And you know, one of my passions over the years has been helping people to break down their barriers, you know, as you're talking about them, Matt. I mean, I worked with people back in the late 80s. I was employed under the employment training scheme, the government scheme, which some of you may remember. And I was helping people to learn how to do video and radio production skills, and getting them to go, I can be creative. And there was some amazing stuff that people produce, which, you know, you won't be surprised at all to hear. But interestingly, when Chris mentioned about stuttering, there was one guy who stuttered, and he was such a sweet man. And he could read a script. So, and he had a beautiful voice, and he could read this script as long as he was reading a script. As soon as he was trying to talk for himself, he stuttered. And there was all sorts of blocks, but hearing his voice and hearing him, you know, narrate some of these videos was lovely. So it is just anything to help people just be themselves and be the full expression of who they're meant to be, because this is the universe is it's the great one song. It's all, I mean, I go on about this at times, but you know, we are here to play our part, whatever that play part is. And yeah, it's fantastic. Anyway, thank you for
my pleasure. Really nice to hear those reflections. Really, really nice. Yeah, I mean, I wonder if I actually limit myself by you know, talking about creativity and the arts and these sort of almost bunkered definitions of what is simply moment by moment present existence. You know, I mean, limitation can be very helpful. By putting a bracket around something, you actually focus the mind and you focus the endeavor, and quite often having limited resources works to your advantage in creativity. There's that old expression, if you want your team to get more creative, take a zero off their budget, you know, create limitation, and that brings out the best in people. But it's, whilst you were talking, I was reflecting on the fact that the most enjoyable part of working as a creative coach is sitting back and seeing someone putting it all together for themselves and then expressing. It's when you hear their voice for the first time, making a statement of something that is uniquely resonantly them. You know, it's like hearing a pitchfork resounding for the first time, and there's always a moment, and it always brings me to tears, because I just feel like I've fulfilled some massive soul contract by engaging on that level with people. You know, it's like, it's not me, it's almost like get out of the way and let them become who they want to become. So in a way, creativity is liberating.
Yeah,
brilliantly articulated. And I think, also, how do we find that space to go back to Diane's point about being the best versions of ourselves? You know, how do we get into that place where we receive, or for me it was like receiving this message, whether it's around activism or creativity or connecting people. What is our purpose? What is that fundamental thing that we want to do now? And that may change within a year or two, within months, but it's being in the moment and knowing what feels right for us at that particular moment. Ken, you've had your hand up.
Yeah. Matt, as you now know, I am far, far away from you. So I would like to know what the best way to keep in touch with you is. And I will repeat, these sessions are really amazing. And it is, for me, a mix of adult education, support group, therapy, and social interaction. I am trying to figure out, what is the point of my doing this? It is relaxing, but I met a young lady who is, young enough to be my granddaughter, who is a singer, and confessed she was a cheerleader in high school. And it occurred to me, well, if she wants to do music videos, maybe there is a way for both of us to be cheerleaders in her music video. So I'll let that rattle around in her brain. And Matt, since you said you were a musician, I'm really curious to find out, you know, who we might have in common and who you've worked with and that sort of stuff. Pete knows that I have a lot of connections in the UK. I've been a big fan of the English folk rock stuff for a long, long time. So curious to know who else you may or may not have in common, and what is the best way to keep in touch with you from far, far away near Washington, D.C.
I've just put on the chat Matt's direct link to his profile, so you can message him there as ever.
There we go. I mean, in terms of you know, shared connections, etc. I mean, most of my work now is away from being not away from being an artist. I'm as much concerned with enabling other people's creativity as I am in focusing on my own projects.
Well, that's a project in and of itself.
Well, it is, and it's no less creative in many ways, but it's merely about, you know, how I choose to spend my time. And what I find soulfully fulfilling now, I think that's possibly a function of age, and also having gone around the block a few times in the music industry and sort of thought, well, yeah, I've done that. What's more fulfilling than trying to tell your story over and over again through music, while actually listening to other people's stories and helping them tell their stories in whatever way they need to has become more fulfilling for me. Like I say, not to the detriment of my own projects. I'm still making, still creating, still an artist, but the balance has shifted quite a lot for me now.
One of the things that's really happened for me lately is discovering new, young, I mean, people young enough to be my children, performers. And here in the Washington, D.C. area, which has large immigrant communities, as do New York, London, Toronto, Montreal, Paris, you know, there is quite a world music community right here. It's amazing. I mean, there's a band I keep telling everybody about called Project Locria, which has members from China, Argentina, Bulgaria, Ethiopia, and the United States. For some reason, somebody from the United States got in there. But, and then to see my new friend from Ethiopia dancing, I'm a klutz, I can shake pom-poms, I can't do contra dancing, you know, enjoying this music that sounded like Wap Weasel and Bellowhead the other day was just incredible. I really got a kick out of that. I like having different parts of my life meet each other, and Pete's kind of provided a medium for that here. And in case you're wondering, I've known Pete for almost 40 years. I first ran into him when he was working with Cooking Vinyl, and I've been writing about music for over 40 years. So that's that story in a nutshell.
Thanks, Ken. It's 35 now, actually.
Something like that.
You were saying 30 last week, and I corrected you to 35.
Yeah, we're, you know.
Thank you.
And he still helps me out with different things, so.
Yeah, I mean, that leads us neatly on to wrapping up, actually. We've just got 12 or so minutes left. Oh, Chris, do you want to say something first before we move?
Just come on to the website. Sean Whiteman has been saying that his dog died last night, and he was looking forward to joining us today. So, I thought, you know, I'll bring that to you, and yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. I didn't realize, actually, I haven't even had time to catch up with new posts, but yeah, Sean is a massive dog man, and very sad to hear that. I know how close he was to his dogs.
Dogs are very.
And sorry, Ken. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Stephen Radford, who was at Camp Out and Chilled Cider, is on the mend. He's actually been posting on Facebook, so I've been very worried about him since his heart attack. So that's great news that he seems to be on the mend. So yeah, I was just going to invite everyone to basically say what can they offer, if anything. It doesn't have to be anything. What would they like to move into would be the reverse of that, as a final throwaway quick question. In terms of my own contributions, I'd be more than happy to talk to people about podcasting. That's one thing I really want to get into again for Campfire. We did the Firecasts. The last one I did was about a year ago, and it prompted me when my good friend Chrissy Morrison died in Frome this week. I remembered a podcast I'd done with her, which I posted on the site, which really captures the essence of Chrissy, who was the queen of Frome in many ways, and that she wrote a brilliant book. She was a true creative. So to hear her on that podcast, for me, ties in so well with this session about what inspires people to be creative and what drove her to write those books and blogs. I'm happy to go through, if anyone fancies doing articles rather than quick posts on the site, and developing what you can actually do with rich media in terms of embedding videos, in terms of photos, hyperlinks, all those things. I'm more than happy to do a session privately with you on that, if you'd like to message me. In terms of what I'd like to do, I'd like to get my book out, which I sort of had written over 10 years ago, and it's been on the back burner. I need to have the impetus and the space to get that out.
At last.
I want to read that. I hope you put a lot about your, music stuff in there. But
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot of stuff about music and events and blah blah blah. So yeah, I'd like to go around the circle if anyone wants to offer, or what do they want to achieve? I don't like the word achieve. What would they like to bring to fruition that's maybe is bubbling? Ken.
all right. Dogs are empathic. Yes, no question about it. I do need to send you another list of songs to play.
For radio.
Yeah, for the radio
Sure.
thing. This
Send
is
them through.
another great session. I what does that say? Post to Campfire Convention. I don't know what was I trying to say there? I can't read it. Yeah, just all these sessions are really good. I get a lot of support out of it. It's amazing to think that I've reconnected with Pete after such a long time. And I wish I could meet all you guys in person. It sounds like the Paris community is really something. And yeah, I guess I will be in touch with all of you via the site. I had a really weird week when my email vanished. I was locked out for about 36 hours. Anyway, enough of that. Be well, stay safe, peace, love, and pom-poms. Somebody take a picture while you can.
I will do, Ken. If you want to pirouette around for us, we can definitely do a screen grab on that. I'm going to pin you here, so I've got you on full
but
screen.
do a full body shot this time.
Well, you'll have to go further back.
Right, I know. I finally realized that. Dealing with these tech things, the thing that gets me about it is it's so intricate and there's so many parts.
I see you've been tidying up your CD boxes again.
Yes, and obviously what you and I can discuss is when I spent 2 hours on the Barnes and Noble site because they were having a CD sale in the World Miscellaneous section.
I'm going to do a screen grab in 5 seconds. So do what you need to do, and I will.
Well, all right. You get a full body shot now.
We've got the body, but not the head. So you'd have to lean down a bit or something if you want.
Okay. Yeah. Is that better?
That's fine. Yeah. Shake your booty. Thank you. I got the screen grab.
Curious to see how that turns out.
Thank you. And what you said about radio prompted me also, if anyone fancies doing a show for Campfire Radio, Matt's done some excellent ones in the past, and hopefully both of us are due to do new ones, I think, fairly soon. So if anyone would like to do Campfire Radio, whether it's your own music or you talking about something in particular, let me know and we can organize that as a collaborative project. So Diane.
Yeah, I'd actually be interested in having a conversation with you, Pete, because I'd happily do podcast or something else, so if we could maybe have a chat at some point, that'd be fab. And yeah, just I think my big takeaway, well, not takeaway, but just kind of amusing on this is the creative arts in their very, very broadest sense. It's all about common language. We can talk through music, or we can talk through painting or sharing a meal, creating a meal together. And we don't have to have the same verbal language, English, French, German, or whatever. It's amazing how it overcomes stuff. And and I'll just finish on, I've just been taken to a thought. One of the participants had one time on a workshop, she was deaf, and so she had an interpreter with her, and she asked me at the whether I can speak sign language, and I said no. She said, but I really understand you, and it's to do with the way that I present and what I do. She could really understand a lot without actually necessarily having to have it translated. So that was an very interesting reflection from that person.
Yeah, language so important, and presentation. And I know I've had various conversations over the last 2 or 3 weeks about how we present even a quick post on Campfire, you know, what words we put around it to frame it, or do we just post the link and say nothing about it, which can often be cause for confusion, and how we make our point land, whether it's creative or analytical or whatever, is so crucial, I think. AB.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to take you up on the podcast thing, so I will give you a call. And also my book, which is Success After DV, Domestic Violence, which has been on the go for a while. So Matt, that's a project that I think will be very helpful to a lot of people.
Beautiful, love it.
And so, yeah, so I do need to get that out. I've been talking about it for about 3-4 years. And I feel very inspired by it. And I've met a lot of people who I've spoken to about it, and they've said, yeah, I need to do that, to get it out there to people. So yeah.
Wonderful. Will you please message me on the Campfire site?
I will do.
And we'll have a chat. I'd love to help you get that out now.
And,
Great.
Thanks also, AB, for being so engaged in the community. I know you only joined a couple of months ago, but your posting has been quite interesting and at times provocative.
Sorry.
But never apologize. I'm lavishing praise in your direction here. Chris.
Yeah, I think maybe I don't know, Matt, do you want to go into dreams a bit more? Because I think that's a great source of creativity.
Oh, yes.
And
it's on my next page of notes. We never got there.
Yeah, we did have not one but 2 sessions at Camp Out on Dreams. One was Tamara's, who I was hoping would join us today. But the other one was Tony Hawkins and his partner Sophia, I think, who will be at the London Beacon meeting as well. So last word with you, Matt.
Thank you, Christopher, for nature and dreams. I mean, we could do an entire session on each of those and still not have done enough, especially in terms of relation to creativity. My sense today is it's affirming for me to be able to talk about this territory, this material. So I'm very grateful to be able to sit with you and just share some of my views of the world in relation to creativity. And today, my challenge, and it's a very happy one, is to make the mundane a creative process. So the little things that I'm going to be doing today to set up my week, I'm going to put as much creativity into as possible. There's some chores and there's a little bit of work that I have to do, which is sort of, workaday stuff. And it's like you can make absolutely every moment of your life creative. So that's my challenge today.
Yeah, I'd echo that. And also I'm in gratitude when I turn the shower on, actually. I'm for that water that flows over me, particularly when it's warm water, which is even more welcome at the moment. And I'm in gratitude for the lavatory paper and the way it can creatively be used.
Good luck with the weather, Pete. And the only thing I will leave you guys with, besides, good luck and safe travels and be well and stay safe and all that, is I have gotten to the point whether I'm posting on this or that other site, which we don't mention, I have learned that I've got to be a bit more careful in exactly what words and phrases I use so I'm not misinterpreted and I don't cause other strife, if that's the right word.
Yeah, that's the point. I think we were agreed on that it's how we make our points land and the language and the presentation.
It's taken a long time for me to realize that. Yes.
I mean, it'd be worth having a session purely on presentation.
Every bloody topic we've done has deserved more time. No question about that. And like I said before, this is a mix of social gathering, adult education, therapy, support group.
Yeah. You've said this and keep saying it.
I know, well, because I mean it. And otherwise, I mean, I wouldn't be showing up here at 5:30 in the morning, US East Coast time, if it wasn't like that.
Yeah, thanks. So in terms of next week, we've obviously got the London Beacon meeting starting at midday. So I don't think we're going to be able to do the same time slot, but I propose instead of the 18th, we maybe do something on the solstice, which is Wednesday, the 21st in the evening. So I don't know how many of you that would be convenient for. But it seems fitting given that the last 2 years we've done a sort of mini online winter gathering, particularly during lockdown. I don't have the appetite to do that this year, and I'm too busy to organize it, but it would be nice to do something on the evening of the 21st.
Doesn't have to be formal. We just hang out here, like, you know.
Yeah, sure. We can do whatever's arising, play some tunes. Maybe everyone could submit a track and talk about it. Maybe we could do a version of, Matt and I were involved in what I called Selector, which was a trial version of that. We went round a circle of 6 people and selected a track each, 2 tracks, in fact, and talked about it.
Have people noticed, Don, that in the corner that says original sound from musicians off? Can we think about turning it on sometime and see what happens?
What's that, Chris? Which bit?
I'm looking at my Zoom app at the moment, and it says original sound from musicians is off. So that sort of made me suspicious. Can we play live music now on Zoom?
Well, did you hear the stuff I was playing at the beginning? That came through, presumably. It wasn't live music, but it was recorded.
I mean, I think people are even doing recordings via Zoom. I'm not quite sure how that works. I'm not technical at all, but you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the little squares up there. And I guess if you're a band and you have instruments, there are ways to.
Oh yeah.
Because I think, in fact, I think a lot of recording is being done that way now. I mean, again, I'm not technical, but people are making new music these days, sometimes under the most adverse circumstances, and I admire that.
Yeah, I think the King Singers and the Swingle Singers have been doing a lot of that sort of split screen shared stuff. I don't know how they do it.
Which?
Well, the King Singers, who we've talked about on previous,
yeah.
and the Swingle Singers, similar,
right,
vocal-based acts. Anyway, yeah. We could go down that rabbit hole, but thank you, everyone. Great session. Thanks to Matt in particular for leading on the creative edge.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Really nice
good to see you all.
See you all soon.
Thanks.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Bye.